Before civilization. How ancient humans created the world we live in, before humanity built cities, before kings ruled empire, before religion, philosophy, or written history. The world belonged to nature, and nature was merciless. The earth of prehistoric humanity was not a world of comfort. It was a world of endless winters, towering predators, violent storms, and darkness that stretched across the land without a single light to break it. For millions of years, survival itself was humanity's greatest achievement. Long before humans ruled the planet, we were simply another frightened animal trying not to die. Our story begins in Africa, not the modern world of borders and nations, but a wild prehistoric continent filled with vast grasslands, dense forests, and deadly predators. Somewhere within this brutal landscape, small groups of early humans struggled to survive. They were weak compared to the creatures around them. They had no claws, no sharp teeth, no armor, no speed. A single mistake could mean death. Lions stalked the plains. Hyenas hunted in packs. Massive crocodiles waited silently beneath rivers. And when night arrived, the darkness itself became terrifying. Because for early humans, darkness meant vulnerability. Every sound in the night could be a predator approaching. Every shadow could hide death. Humanity was not born powerful. Humanity was born afraid. But ancient humans possessed something unusual, something evolution had slowly been building for millions of years. Intelligence, not modern intelligence, not science or mathematics, but the beginning of imagination, pattern recognition, and memory. Unlike most animals, humans could learn from the past. A dangerous river crossing remembered by one generation could save the next. A successful hunting strategy could spread through an entire tribe. Knowledge itself became a survival tool, and slowly, humanity began changing. Around 2 million years ago, early human species like Homo erectus began walking farther than any of their ancestors ever had. They crossed enormous distances. Some left Africa entirely. For the first time in history, human beings were entering completely foreign worlds. Frozen mountains, open deserts, dense jungles, humanity was spreading across the earth. But survival remained unbelievably difficult. Most children never reached adulthood. Injuries could become death sentences. Starvation was constant. Entire tribes could vanish during harsh winters or long droughts. The prehistoric world did not care about human ambition. Nature decided who survived, and nature was ruthless. Yet something extraordinary was happening inside the human mind. Ancient humans were beginning to cooperate on levels almost no other species could achieve. Other animals hunted together, but humans could do something different. Humans could imagine together. A tribe could create plans, prepare traps, share knowledge, protect children, care for the injured. Over time, cooperation became humanity's greatest weapon. A single human was weak, but a tribe working together became dangerous. That truth would eventually reshape the planet itself. Then came one of the greatest discoveries in human history: fire. At first, humans likely feared it. Lightning strikes would ignite forests, sending walls of flame across the land. Fire destroyed everything in its path. But eventually, humans learned something revolutionary. Fire could be controlled. And once humanity controlled fire, everything changed. Fire gave warmth during freezing nights. It scared away predators hiding in darkness. It allowed humans to cook food, making meat safer to eat and easier to digest. Some scientists believe cooking helped the human brain grow larger over time by allowing the body to gain more energy from food. For the first time, humans were no longer completely helpless against nature. But fire changed something even more important. It changed human society itself. At night, tribes gathered around flames, and, for the first time in history, humanity could remain awake after sunset. People began communicating more, teaching more, remembering more. Stories were born beside firelight. The earliest myths, the earliest fear, the earliest dreams. All likely began around ancient fires burning in the darkness. Civilization itself may have started there. Not in cities, not in kingdoms, but around small circles of light surrounded by endless night. As thousands of years passed, human beings slowly evolved into something more recognizable. Homo sapiens emerged roughly 300,000 years ago, and unlike earlier human species, they possessed minds capable of extraordinary imagination. Humans began creating tools with increasing precision. Stone blades, spears, axes, weapons became extensions of intelligence. Humanity was learning how to shape the world around it. Then humans began creating something even stranger: art. Deep inside, caves across Europe, Africa, and Asia. Prehistoric people painted animals across stone walls. Bison, horses, mammoths, handprints, symbols. To modern eyes, they may seem primitive, but these paintings represented something revolutionary. Humans were no longer focused only on survival. They were trying to express ideas, meaning, identity, emotion. Somewhere deep within those caves, humanity's imagination was awakening, but the Earth itself remained unstable. The Ice Age still gripped enormous parts of the planet. Massive glaciers covered entire regions. Temperatures fluctuated violently. Food sources disappeared without warning, and humanity was constantly pushed toward extinction. At several points in prehistory, the total human population may have dropped dangerously low. Some scientists believe there were moments when only a few thousand humans remained alive on Earth. Humanity came terrifyingly close to disappearing forever. If our ancestors had failed during those ancient catastrophes, the modern world would never exist. No civilizations, no empires, no cities, no modern humanity. Everything depended on survival, and survival demanded adaptation. Humans became endurance hunters. Unlike predators that relied on bursts of speed, humans relied on persistence. A wounded animal could run faster than a human, but humans could follow it for hours, sometimes days. The human body evolved for long-distance movement. Sweating allowed humans to cool themselves efficiently. Strong legs allowed them to travel enormous distances. Ancient hunters would slowly exhaust prey until the animal physically collapsed. Humanity survived not because we were strongest, but because we refused to stop. Over generations, human tribes spread farther across the planet. Some crossed into Europe, where they encountered another intelligent species, the Neanderthals. Neanderthals were powerful, adapted to cold climates, physically stronger than modern humans. For thousands of years, multiple human species shared the Earth, but eventually, only one remained. Us, 4. Exactly why Homo sapiens survived while others disappeared remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Perhaps humans adapted faster. Perhaps cooperation gave them an advantage. Perhaps imagination itself changed the outcome. Whatever the reason, humanity became the last surviving human species on Earth. And from that moment onward, the future of intelligent life belonged entirely to us. But ancient humans still lived fragile lives. Most people never traveled far from their tribe. There were no nations, no laws, no permanent homes. Humanity remained deeply connected to nature. The seasons controlled everything. Rain meant survival, drought meant death. Animals were respected, feared, sometimes worshipped. The natural world was not separate from humanity. It was humanity's entire existence. Then something happened that would transform the Earth forever. Near the end of the last ice age, global temperatures slowly began rising. Glaciers retreated, forests expanded, wild grain spread across parts of the Middle East. For thousands of years, humans had wandered endlessly searching for food. But now, some tribes noticed something extraordinary. Plants could be grown intentionally, Seeds placed into soil could create more food later. It seemed simple, but this discovery would change human history more than almost anything else ever would. Because once humans learned how to grow food, they no longer needed to wander. And the moment humanity stopped wandering, civilization became possible. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans had lived as part of nature. Now, for the first time, humanity was about to reshape nature itself, and in doing so, we would begin creating the world we live in today. For most of human history, our ancestors wandered endlessly across the earth. They followed migrating animals, seasonal rivers, changing weather. Humanity survived by moving, but then, everything changed. Around 12,000 years ago, the last ice age slowly began to end. Massive glaciers that had once covered enormous parts of the planet started retreating northward. The earth became warmer, forests expanded, rivers stabilized, and across parts of the Middle East, wild grains began growing in enormous quantities. To ancient humans, this land must have seemed miraculous. For generations, tribes had depended entirely on hunting animals and gathering plants. Now, food appeared in predictable locations, and slowly, humans discovered something revolutionary. Seeds placed into the ground could grow into new plants. Humanity had discovered agriculture. At first, farming probably seemed insignificant, just another survival strategy. But agriculture changed humanity more than almost any invention in history. Because once humans could grow food intentionally, they no longer needed to wander endlessly across the world. For the first time, people could remain in one place. Villages appeared, then larger villages, then towns. Humanity was beginning to settle, and with settlement came something entirely new: civilization. One of the first great centers of civilization emerged in a region later called Mesopotamia, a land between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. Today, this region lies mostly within modern Iraq, but thousands of years ago, it became the birthplace of organized human society. The soil there was rich. Floodwaters helped crops grow. Farmers produced wheat and barley in massive amounts. And for the first time in history, humans could create food surpluses. This changed everything. Before agriculture, almost everyone spent their lives searching for food. But now, not everyone had to farm. Some people became builders, others became priests, merchants, soldiers, craftsmen. Human society was becoming specialized, complex, organized, and as populations expanded, small villages transformed into enormous cities. One of the greatest among them was Uruk. Uruk was unlike anything humanity had ever seen before. Thousands of people living together behind massive walls, crowded streets, markets filled with trade, temples towering over the city. For ancient humans, cities must have felt almost unreal. For hundreds of thousands of years, human beings had lived in small tribes. Now they were surrounded by strangers. Civilization was changing the human experience itself, but cities created new problems. More people required more organization, more food, more laws, more control, and eventually, humanity created one of its most powerful inventions: writing. At first, writing was simple: marks carved into clay tablets, mostly records, grain storage, trade transactions, taxes. But over time, these symbols evolved into language. Thoughts could now survive beyond memory. Knowledge no longer died with the individual. Humanity had found a way to preserve ideas forever. History itself had begun, and where cities grew, power followed. Kings emerged, rulers claiming authority over entire populations. Some claimed power through strength, others through religion, because ancient humans believed the gods controlled everything: floods, storms, disease, harvests, victory and war. The line between religion and government barely existed. To rule a city was often to rule in the name of the gods themselves. One of the earliest legendary rulers was Gilgamesh, part man, part myth. The stories surrounding Gilgamesh became some of humanity's first great epics. According to legend, he sought immortality itself, because even as civilization advanced, humans still feared death. Empires rose, cities expanded, but mortality remained undefeated, and that fear would shape civilizations for thousands of years to come. As cities grew richer, competition became inevitable. Neighboring civilizations fought over land, water, resources, and trade. Humanity had entered a new age, an age of organized warfare. Armies marched beneath banners, bronze weapons replaced stone, walls surrounded cities, and conquest became one of civilization's driving forces. For many rulers, power was never enough. Every king feared rivals, every empire feared collapse. Civilization created greatness, but it also created greed. Meanwhile, another extraordinary civilization was rising along the Nile River. Egypt, unlike Mesopotamia's unpredictable rivers, the Nile flooded in regular cycles. Its waters brought fertile soil every year. This stability allowed Egyptian civilization to flourish for thousands of years, and the Egyptians developed one of the most powerful governments the ancient world had ever seen. At the center stood the pharaoh, not merely a king, but a living god. The Egyptians believed their rulers were divine beings connected directly to the heavens, and when a pharaoh died, they believed his spirit continued into the afterlife. Death was not the end. It was a transition, and to prepare for eternity, the Egyptians built monuments, unlike anything humanity had ever attempted before. The pyramids. The Great Pyramids of Giza rose from the desert like mountains created by human hands. Millions of stone blocks, moved without modern machinery, built through staggering human labor. Even today, they remain among the greatest engineering achievements in history. But the pyramids were more than tombs. They were symbols, proof that civilization had become powerful enough to reshape the earth itself. Human ambition was growing larger, bolder, more dangerous. Meanwhile, far to the east, another civilization was emerging beside the Yellow River in China. Like other ancient societies, its survival depended on agriculture, but the Yellow River was unpredictable. Its floods could destroy entire communities overnight. To ancient Chinese society, maintaining order against nature became one of the ruler's greatest responsibilities. And from this struggle emerged one of history's oldest continuous civilizations. Across the ancient world, humanity was changing rapidly. Trade routes connected distant regions. Ideas spread between civilizations. Bronze tools transformed farming and warfare. Population exploded. Cities expanded farther than ever before. But civilization came with consequences. Life inside early cities was harsh. Disease spread easily through crowded populations. Most people worked exhausting labor from sunrise to sunset. Farmers carried enormous tax burdens. Slavery became increasingly common. Social hierarchies formed. Kings and nobles lived in luxury, while ordinary laborers struggled simply to survive. Civilization created inequality as much as progress. And yet, despite suffering, humans continued building. Because civilization offered something prehistoric, life never could. Stability, structure, purpose. For the first time in history, human beings could imagine permanent societies, permanent homes, permanent legacies. Humanity was no longer merely surviving. We were beginning to shape history itself. Then another revolution appeared. The wheel, simple but transformative. The wheel changed transportation, trade, agriculture, warfare. Entire civilizations became more connected because of it. Human innovation was accelerating, and with every discovery, humanity gained greater control over the world. But while civilizations expanded, nature still remained powerful. Droughts destroyed harvests, floods wiped out cities, earthquakes leveled temples, disease spread without understanding. Ancient people searched desperately for meaning behind these disasters, and often, They believed angry gods were responsible. Religion became deeply intertwined with survival. Priests gained enormous influence. Temples became centers of power, and throughout the ancient world, humanity searched for answers about existence itself. Why are we here? Why do we suffer? What happens after death? These questions haunted ancient civilizations, just as they haunt humanity today. Because despite all our progress, human beings remain deeply afraid of the unknown. But civilization kept moving forward. Empires expanded, trade networks grew, knowledge spread farther across continents, and somewhere within these ancient societies, the foundations of the modern world were slowly being created. Government, religion, economics, architecture, law, writing, organized warfare, everything humanity would later build upon, began here in the first cities of the ancient world. But civilization was still young, and humanity's greatest empires had not yet arrived. Because soon, new kingdoms would rise across the earth, kingdoms obsessed with conquest, glory, and immortality, and they would reshape human history forever. As civilization spread across the ancient world, humanity became obsessed with a terrifying idea: death. No matter how powerful a king became, no matter how large an empire grew, every human life still ended the same way. And for ancient civilizations, death was not simply feared. It was a mystery that consumed entire societies. Nowhere was this obsession greater than in ancient Egypt. Along the fertile banks of the Nile River, a civilization emerged that believed death itself could be defeated. The Egyptians did not see their pharaohs as ordinary rulers. The pharaoh was divine, a living bridge between humanity and the gods. His rule maintained order across the earth, and when he died, the universe itself could fall into chaos. To the Egyptians, life on earth was only one stage of existence. Beyond death waited another world, an eternal afterlife where the pharaoh would continue ruling forever. But immortality required preparation. The body had to survive. The soul had to survive. Memory itself had to survive. And so, Egypt began building monuments unlike anything humanity had ever attempted before. The pyramids, massive stone mountains rising from the desert sands. Even today, they feel almost impossible. Millions of limestone blocks, weighing tons each, transported and stacked with ancient technology. For decades, entire generations labored beneath the burning Egyptian sun. Not for survival, not for food, but for eternity. The first great pyramid builders believed they were constructing gateways into immortality. Inside these colossal tombs, pharaohs were buried alongside treasures, gold, weapons, statues, and sacred objects. Everything a ruler might need in the next world. The dead were carefully preserved through mummification. Organs removed, bodies wrapped in linen. Faces transformed into symbols of eternal power. Egyptians believed that if the body survived, the spirit could live forever. Humanity was now trying to conquer death itself. Then came one of the greatest rulers in Egyptian history, Khufu. Under his rule, workers built the Great Pyramid of Giza, a structure so enormous that thousands of years later, human beings still stand before it in disbelief. The Great Pyramid became a declaration to the world. Civilization had become powerful enough to reshape nature itself. Human ambition was reaching unimaginable heights. But Egypt was more than pyramids. It was one of humanity's first truly organized superpowers. At the bottom of society stood farmers and laborers. Above them were artisans, merchants, soldiers, priests, and government officials. At the very top stood the pharaoh. Every layer of Egyptian civilization existed to serve him. Food, taxes, war, religion. Everything revolved around centralized power. Human civilization was becoming hierarchical, structured, controlled. And while Egypt flourished beside the Nile, other civilizations across the world were rising in different ways. In Mesopotamia, Powerful kings sought to dominate neighboring cities. Empires formed and collapsed rapidly. War became constant. Because once civilization created wealth, humans began fighting endlessly to control it. One ruler in particular would forever change the idea of law itself: Hammurabi, the king of Babylon. Hammurabi understood something dangerous about civilization. Large societies could not survive through strength alone. They needed rules. So around 1750 BCE, he created one of history's first written legal systems, the Code of Hammurabi, carved into massive stone pillars. These laws governed every aspect of life: trade, marriage, crime, punishment, and many of the punishments were brutal. An eye for an eye, a bone for a bone. Justice in the ancient world was harsh, but Hammurabi's code established something revolutionary: the idea that society itself should be controlled through written law, not merely the whims of rulers. Modern legal systems still carry echoes of this ancient beginning. Meanwhile, far beyond Mesopotamia and Egypt, human civilization continued expanding. Trade routes stretched across deserts and mountains. Bronze weapons spread between kingdoms. Ideas traveled farther than ever before. The world was slowly becoming connected, and with connection came larger conflicts. In Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, the Hittite Empire rose to power. The Hittites mastered metalworking and warfare. They built disciplined armies and powerful chariots capable of dominating battlefields. At the same time, Egypt continued expanding its influence across the ancient Near East. Two superpowers were approaching collision, and humanity was entering a new age of organized warfare. For ancient kings, war was more than conquest. War was glory, immortality through victory. To conquer enemies was to prove divine favor itself, and few rulers believed this more than Ramesses II, one of the most powerful pharaohs Egypt would ever produce. Ramesses expanded temples across Egypt. Massive statues of himself towered above cities. His image covered monuments across the empire. Like many rulers before him, Ramesses wanted to be remembered forever. But another empire blocked his ambitions: the Hittites, and between them stood the city of Kadesh. In 1274 BCE, one of the greatest battles of the ancient world began: the Battle of Kadesh. Thousands of chariots thundered across the battlefield. Dust consumed the horizon. Bronze weapons clashed beneath the desert sun. Ramesses believed victory would secure eternal glory. But the Hittites were ready. The battle descended into chaos. Neither side achieved complete victory, and for perhaps the first time in history, two rival superpowers realized endless war could destroy them both. Eventually, Egypt and the Hittites signed one of humanity's earliest recorded peace treaties. After generations of bloodshed, they chose diplomacy over destruction. Trade replaced warfare. Knowledge spread between civilizations. Even ancient humanity was beginning to understand a difficult truth: sometimes peace creates greater power than conquest. But despite these moments of cooperation, most ancient societies remained deeply violent. Kings rose through war, empires expanded through conquest, and ordinary people paid the price. Farmers were taxed heavily. Soldiers died in distant battles. Slaves built monuments they would never benefit from. Civilization created greatness, but it also created suffering on enormous scales. And yet, humanity kept building. Because civilization gave humans something prehistoric life never could: legacy. Ancient rulers desperately wanted to leave permanent marks upon history. Pyramids, temples, palaces, walls, statues, monuments became humanity's way of fighting against time itself. If the body could not live forever, perhaps memory could. Meanwhile, religion continued growing more powerful. Across the world, humans worshipped gods connected to nature. Gods of the sun, storms, death, war, fertility. The universe seemed unpredictable and terrifying. Religion offered meaning, comfort, control. Priests became some of the most influential people in society, because whoever claimed to understand the gods could influence entire civilizations. But beneath all the wealth and power, ancient humanity remained fragile. A drought could collapse kingdoms. A plague could wipe out cities. A failed harvest could create famine across entire regions. Nature still controlled civilization more than civilization controlled nature. Empires believed they were eternal. History would prove otherwise, and beyond the great kingdoms of Egypt and Mesopotamia, new civilizations were rising. In Greece, small city-states were beginning to experiment with entirely new ideas about politics, philosophy, and warfare. In India, new spiritual traditions were emerging. In China, powerful dynasties were forming along great rivers. Humanity was entering an age of ideas, and soon, those ideas would reshape civilization forever, because the next great revolution would not come from pyramids, or king, or armies. It would come from the human mind itself.